Hello, my name is Nate Louisignau, and I have the pleasure and honor of presenting a research paper I wrote about Japanese education identity to you, my class, and to a conference that is held here on the campus of Concordia University Ann Arbor on Thursday, the Conference for Art and Spirituality. The theme this year at the conference is identity, which is why I chose to do my research paper on Japanese education identity. I'm excited to share with you my findings. Behind me, as you can see, is some of the many pictures I took while I was in Japan. You can see some headings. I'm just going to kind of rotate those so you can see everything else. And you see I have some pictures of my students with me, and then also right here, you can see there's the cleaning stuff in my class at elementary school, the teacher's room, some music, me having fun with the kids. It goes on and on. So I'll start at the beginning. What identity do the Japanese give to those responsible for education? When visiting this great country, one receives a sense of citizenship, companionship, and responsibility that is prominent among the people of Japan. Mutual respect and awareness for each other as a people is one of the first aspects one notices when observing the daily Japanese lifestyle. One cannot miss the constant awareness for the elderly and the young and handicapped amongst even the most distracted teenagers in Japan. From an early age, awareness and appreciation for every living thing is instilled in the youth of this country, and it has been delegated to the schools and to teachers to make sure that these values are honed and carefully used in Japanese modern-day society. The attitude of the Japanese people towards education is an attitude that honestly deserves replication across the globe. In this research paper, I will present how identity is developed in children through schools in Japan. Education has come a long way since World War II in Japan, and yet the values that teachers have been trained to instill in their students have not changed in over 100 years. I have a quote from Katsuno. School is a place where children and teachers are forming their identities. The identity of teachers, students, and parents in Japan have been a driving force for teachers and schools to push their students to greater levels and have greatly aided in the establishment of a culture and people that have expanded on the boundaries of excellence, respect, and responsibility in the last 60 years. Together, as a profession, Japanese teachers display a specific identity as they have a deep sense of responsibility and teamwork that makes them one of the most efficient and well-trained group of educators on earth. In Japan, training to be a school teacher is one of the noblest callings an individual can have. I have a quote here. In Japan, practical abilities and experience developed culturally are valued more than the acquisition of pedagogical philosophies. Basically, what they're saying is that hands-on experience is just as important as academic experience. Being an adult, learning how to do basic adult things is important to the Japanese people. Having education that is a well-rounded education, as one of my quotes says up here, the Japanese view education as a full circle experience. It's not just about the test scores, and yet they are one of the highest test scoring countries in the world. They're obviously doing something right, and it starts with the basic training that these teachers are getting. While knowledge is important, teaching cultural expectations is just as important to the Japanese educator. The Japanese, as an entire culture, look at teaching as a profession for the bold few, thus putting immense pressure, honestly, on the teacher going into those professions. While the world of Japanese education has changed over time, so has the role of the Japanese teacher in the classroom. With policy changes that demand more rigorous testing for school children, the workload for teachers has intensified. Until 2007, Japanese school children went to school 6 days a week, and Sundays were reserved for sporting events. Because teaching children in Japan is considered a rigorous job, the teachers are also the coaches for the athletic teams at the schools, which means that basically Japanese teachers never get a day off. unless they're sick or have other reasons to not be there. Katsuno from the University of Tokyo states that Japan's teachers have a self-image as humane professionals who are responsible for and committed to the holistic development of the child in their charge. The teachers believe that their personal and emotional relationship with the children play an important role in carrying out an effective teaching and learning. Teachers are deeply committed to their students. I had such a pleasure working with these individuals. They were so committed to their children. It was a beautiful thing. It was not about them. Teachers are deeply committed to their students, and it's quite evident when they're at their school 7 days a week from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. Every day, and sometimes later. Also in Japan, teachers all work together in one large room where the desks are all grouped together in large islands by grade level. You can see a little bit. Here's a picture of what it might look like there. In a picture, if you look closely, there are desks all lined up with each other. And this creates a more cultural feeling, a more group feeling as a whole, and not individuals like trying to fight for different time periods and such. The schools believe that the teacher-to-teacher communication and teamwork is vital to a successful career in school culture. The students are assigned to a single classroom from which they only leave to go to the classes such as physical education and lab science, meaning that teachers go from room to room themselves, then the students stay in the room. The teachers, on the other hand, move from classroom to classroom with large baskets that contain all the materials needed to teach. Everything inside the school is geared towards student success, and the teachers are always trained to put the students' needs before their own. Many people from outside Japan who look at teacher-to-student relationships think there is a very quiet environment. Think of a very inquirer environment where the students read quietly to their teachers as their teachers stand in front of the room and teach to a controlled audience. That's simply not the case. It's a very interactive way where teachers are not just dictators in their classroom. However, in fact, Japanese classrooms can be extremely noisy and loud. Why? Because teachers have mastered the art of student engagement in the lesson. We need to do that so bad. The students can be seen whispering excitedly to each other about a certain problem, or the teacher will be overseeing the students acting out a situation and problem in a skit. A quote here: "The primary goal of Japanese teachers is student engagement." Right there. That's their primary goal. Teachers are constantly researching and working together to develop new strategies on how to improve student participation and engagement in the class. Japanese teachers as a whole have developed an identity as hard workers who always put not only the personal emotional needs of their students first, but their academic needs as well. One example is as follows, quote, "I arrive at 6:30 a.m. to make specific calls to students about their health. After that, I double-check my lesson plans for the day and then prepare my first classroom before returning to my desk to check about any students who might need specific accommodations for that classroom." A junior high Japanese teacher reports that this displays a sense of dedication and selflessness that teachers are to display when they enter their schools. When one is prepared to become a teacher in Japan, it isn't all about just the lesson plans and teaching content. It is about teaching character and responsibility, raising the next generation of Japanese teachers and Japanese citizens. In Japan, teachers have a great responsibility given to them by society, as it is the teacher's job to teach and train the students in all aspects of Japanese culture, and it is the parents' role to be supportive and encouraging of students while at home. This might sound very familiar, but for the Japanese, these roles are taken to a whole new level. When a student graduates or moves on, their performance and maturity reflect directly on the parents and on the teachers. Not only is it important to be smart and good at a job, but it is also important to be an active, positive contributor to society. Marcin Bennett reports that the school is primarily responsible for the education and development of 1. Well-rounded children with the integration of the right morals and physical strength who make good judgments and think creatively, and 2. Humane and rich children who have solidarity with society and the common good. Teachers are also trained to model these character traits for their students. Teachers are not selected and hired based solely on their test scores or their lesson plans, but on their character. Japanese students are taught to identify themselves as high-performing students, And because of this, they are put under rigorous and sometimes questionable amounts of work and stress. On top of the many academic expectations placed on the students, there are also many social expectations. Matsuda here explained the goal of social education, quote, to achieve individual self-fulfillment by either systematically organizing formal education and non-formal education, or accumulating non-formal education and at the same time contributing to a better society. It is important that academics are important. However, it's important that these students are trained as individual social people who have responsibility and care about the common good. The Japanese view social education as a primary concern for the general welfare of the Japanese culture and for the continuance of tradition and care for the whole nation. Students are taught from an early age that they do not function as individuals and their culture, but they are part of a greater system that takes care of each other, and especially places a special emphasis on respecting and taking care of the elderly. They are taught it is not about you, it is not about what you want, it is not about me. It is about what can I do to better the people in my country. Students are taught that to take care of the elderly is to take care of their future because one's ancestors directly affect the future, and therefore taking care of the elderly positively affects one's relationship with the ancestors of one's family. Quote, social education lies deep within social society or community and takes part in the process of creating autonomous practices by citizens to realize common good and self-governance in communities. Every community relies on the education of the next generation to carry on the traditions and the practices of that specific community. Each community is formed around certain customs and expectations that were put into place by that community. These customs and expectations are what make that community unique. For example, in Tomisato City, Chiba, Japan, which is where my school is located, there is a strong custom of growing watermelons, and this is celebrated through multiple festivals throughout the year. Jackie the Watermelon Man is a focus in all Tomisato classrooms because of its significance to the identity of Tomisato City. Each individual city has its own identity, and this is one way that Tomisato shows its identity. Students in Japan are held to the same standards and expectations. Even though students who are considered special needs are expected to advance in their classrooms at the same pace as normal students. How can they do this successfully without still experiencing setbacks? It's because of how education is approached in Japan. Quote, a key to Japan's success in education has been the traditional belief that all children can be achievers. Simply, there is a set expectation for all students to be successful in school. This expectation is transmitted to the students by harsh regulations in teaching, but simply by inspiring all students to believe that they are capable of doing what they are capable of doing. This expectation is not transmitted to students by harsh regulations in teaching. My apologies for that mix-up. But simply by inspiring all students to believe that they are capable of doing anything that they set their minds to. Quote, many countries envy Japan for its clear and ambitious academic standards across the board, and for coherent delivery chains throughout which curricular goals are achieved, thanks to the high-quality instructional systems and practices and approaches to student learning. You see, it's not this dictatorship. It's not this place where it's just drive. There is a little bit of that, there is. But there's so much more emphasis putting on the importance of developing a student as an adult and as a responsible individual. Japan first started educational reform in the 1870s with the Meiji administration, which targeted education as a way to integrate Japanese values, culture, and customs into the school system. In 1947, after World War II, there was a major revamping of Japanese culture and education that helped establish many of the laws and systems the Japanese education system uses today. One of the many improvements was its changes to a more Western style of teaching, like us, but still holding on to the traditional expectations and social education that started several decades earlier. Now, there are rigorous tests taken in order to enter junior high and high school. Students study for hours and stress can be quite difficult and taxing on the students. However, whether observing students learning in a classroom or during recess, one realizes everything in the Japanese education system is strategically done, Recess is scheduled at certain times of the day to elevate and to alleviate stress. Study sessions only happen in certain rooms with teachers who are there specifically to help the students prepare for one specific test, not several. There are after-hour study halls and support groups for students, and through it all, one never hears a complaint or a groan from the students or the teachers. But why not? Isn't it hard work? Is it really fair to expect so much from students so young? Why not let the kids just be kids? That's the real beauty of it. They still can be kids. There is nothing holding them back from going to the park, playing sports, or going on vacation. There is just a system set in place to make sure these students balance everything they do while still making progress. It's a beautiful thing. Each district receives its curriculum from the Japanese Ministry of Education, but then tailors the curriculum to their specific students' needs. Kind of like how charter schools work here. They are still funded by the public government, but they're allowed to pick their own curriculum. Mean, it's kind of a switch with Japan because they still get the same curriculum from the government. However, then they're allowed to take that curriculum and mold it how they need to meet the standards of their students and their needs. The school system in each district is very in tune with the needs of its students, and this leads them to dedicate to the success of their students. And this leads them to be dedicated to the success of their students. One of the greatest identity stances that Japanese education has is its utter and complete dedication to the success of every student, no matter the ability. This allows the students to still be kids, but put in the hard work and still live a happy, healthy, and normal life. Parent role's identity is not to be the teacher, but the supporter and the reinforcer of education at home, not in the school. Quote, thus, according to the teachers, parents should provide joint decision-making opportunities to adolescents, can be most helpful through structuring homework situations and monitoring performance on homework assignments, and should see themselves as having a relatively substantial impact on the child's school development. To the Japanese, education is an equal responsibility. It isn't only the teacher's job who play an important role in the student's education. Parents are considered to have an extremely important supportive role in their children's education. Just as it is important for the students to become model citizens, it is just as important that parents play their part in helping to educate their children on the important social norms. However, Japanese education delineates a clear boundary between parents and teachers in regard to the child's education. Quote, in Japan, parents are expected to attend parent-teacher conferences and school events, but are discouraged from making special requests for their children or questioning teachers' decisions and practices, end quote. While parents are encouraged to take an active part in a child's homework and studies at home, what happens in the classroom is strictly at the discretion of the teacher. The Japanese came to the conclusion that trained and specialized individuals, such as teachers, should be trusted to know how to handle each and every student's individual needs without the assistance of parents. This long-established system has been one of the most successful systems of education in the world. Why is that? How does that work that it's actually more positive when parents aren't as involved? Some might think, well, the parents, it's their job to educate their students to help them grow up. The Japanese, yes, it is part of the parents' job, but they have found these people, they have put time and money into their education, these teachers, to specialize in different areas, in social areas, in academic areas, and they feel that these people are better equipped, actually, than some parents are to educate children on the national identity of the country. Japanese mothers have a great amount of pressure put upon them to make sure their children succeed at home with their homework. Quote, during the time when the children attended preschools, middle-class mothers report being engaged in various cognitive learning activities which were incorporated into their children's daily lives. Japanese mothers quickly take on the identity of a kyoyoku mama, which translates to education mother. These mothers spend their days preparing to assist their children in their studies when they return home in whatever way is needed to ensure the success of their children in school. It has been a long established identity expectation in Japan that the mother stays home to raise their children and assist them in their schooling. This identity for Japanese mothers has been one of the key factors for student success in the Japanese education system. You know, the United States could learn a lot from the Japanese education system, as the Japanese sense of social responsibility and national unity could benefit the USA. The Japanese have created a strong education system for their youth that helps create mature adults that do not think of only themselves, but the good of their entire country. They ask themselves, how can I be part of the identity that shapes Japan? Sometimes Americans need to ask this question of themselves too. Instead of being selfish or only thinking of themselves, American school children must put their petty differences aside and offenses aside and just ask, how can they be a vital part of a greater society? Education in Japan has been established as an identity of maturity and responsibility, leadership and commitment that can stand the test of time. They have created for themselves an identity of a strong, united Japan through their commitment to fostering growth in the next generation. Thank you for listening.